And a very warm welcome to this fireside chat that is focused on innovation systems for sustainable development. I've got my two participants in the fireside chat, which I'm going to introduce very shortly. But perhaps to start off with framing the conversation, the reality and the fact that we know is that South Africa has taken the presidency of the G20 as of December 2024. And this, of course, opens up an opportunity for South Africa to really put Africa and the global south more broadly on the global agenda, and in particular, to really begin to explore the questions of how might we leverage innovation and innovation ecosystems in particular to really drive South Africa, Africa's and the global south's development agenda. In this conversation, we're also going to pause to reflect on the fact that the top performing nations, whichever metric you might be using, seem to have in common this idea of science and technology clusters. And they use these clusters to transfer and to translate innovation into the development space. So we want to understand the architecture of that bridge and what that looks like in the South African and African context. And so we do want to talk a little bit about some of the frontier technologies like AI, like robotics, like biotech, like health tech, and even innovations in energy, and how these could really translate into technological breakthroughs that make a difference in the lived experiences of people of the global south. And so let me first acknowledge and thank the Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, Minister Park Stow, for joining us in this conversation. Minister, we're keen to hear your voice, but in particular around the policies that are really going to define the playing field and create the environment for us to be able to leverage innovation for development outcomes. The CEO of NASPERS South Africa, Madam Phuthi Mahanyele-Dabengwa, is with us. Thank you very much, Phuthi, for being here as you bring the voice of business into this conversation. And maybe where to start, Minister, is to start with the presidency of the G20 that South Africa has now assumed, and to put to you the question, what does this mean in terms of the agenda that we are likely to see coming out of the discussions and the various fora and platforms, and especially as we think about innovation that speaks to the development agenda?
Thank you very much and good morning. Firstly, let me say that the G20 is a great opportunity for South Africa and Africa to not only participate in the discourse around economic growth, development and trade, but it is also an opportunity to be at the leadership, on the leadership table in setting the agenda and the direction, that we should be collectively taking. And our view as South Africa is that we should use this as an opportunity to, one, influence the direction that's being taken, and that would talk about trade-related matters, and trade in relation to the digital economy is important. It is also about ensuring that we promote innovation in the context of innovation and investment in our country, but also being able to take innovation that happens in our country and making it global.
Yes.
So it's the relationship between what happens in the country and the global economy that we also need to promote.
And I think that's a very interesting sort of window to begin to look at. How do we translate and harvest the innovation in the country for the continent and for the world? And I'm going to come back around the mechanisms available for us to do that. But Phuthi, let me bring your voice in, because as we talk about the G20, we also know that there's the B20. And this is an important platform where business leaders really integrate themselves around the G20 agenda. Talk to us a little bit about what business is looking at from a South African perspective, and where innovation for development outcomes actually features in that agenda.
Thank you very much, Nozipho, and good morning to everybody. The B20 is really, really an exciting time for us in South Africa. And I think certainly from our perspective, given the fact that we are taking over from Brazil, and handing over to the US. This is really critical in terms of us being able to drive things forward, and particularly from a global South perspective.
Yes.
This will be the last time that a global South country has the G20 and the B20.
Yeah.
And so this makes it a very, very critical and also opportune time for us to ensure that whatever we are putting into it is really meaningful for all of us. And so when I look at it from a digital perspective, and it is important that we are really taking into account what this means for us as South Africa, but for us as Africa.
Yeah.
Because it is not just an opportune moment just for South Africa, but it is also an opportune moment for the rest of the African continent. And so making sure that we are taking advantage of those opportunities. We are really very, very interested in just looking at how we can ensure that our young people are really very much a part of this conversation. Particularly when you take into account the fact that 45.5% of our young people are unemployed, we want to make sure that they are a part of this conversation. And so we want to make sure that we are boosting entrepreneurship, that we are providing access to digital information and digital education so that they can be part of the AI world, because the rest of the world is focused on AI. And for us, as the largest consumer internet business on the African continent, AI is critical in driving the revenues of our business. And so this is something that's important. We're very hugely excited to be in the B20 as well as the G20. And Minister, we're looking forward to being able to work with you on this.
So, Minister, as I listen to Phuthi, she's already talking to the development mandate. She's talking about young people. She's talking about job creations. She's talking about livelihoods. There seems to be an alignment between the G20 and the B20, at least from a South African context. How do we ensure that that alignment stays intact? Because it's quite easy for these to become parallel processes where government is pushing a particular development mandate and business is maybe pushing an investment mandate or a returns mandate. What do you think has gotten it right in the South African context?
Fortunately, in this instance, there is great alignment between government and business.
Yeah.
Both in terms of providing leadership during this year, the issues that we're putting on the agenda, the political policy and business environment that needs improvement, geopolitical issues and their impact on trade and investment. There is a common agenda. There's also a common agenda in relation to the direction that the country is taking. We think collectively that we have a moment in the country. We have a moment in which both business and government are singing from the same hymn sheet, and we should be able to promote investment and growth from a common platform. But just building on the conversation that we're having, particularly in relation to innovation, reality is that currently in the country, digitalization is assuming its rightful role in terms of industrial policy in the country. The discourse around industrial policy is placing digitalization amongst the critical issues that we need to focus on, the ability to leapfrog to the next level, the acknowledgement that, in fact, many countries have moved far ahead in terms of the digital economy, and there's an opportunity for us to leapfrog. And we think that by placing it firmly on the discourse on industrial policy and it assuming its role, that gives us a greater opportunity to, one, promote investments, bring in the partners and the innovation. We've had many companies, many enterprises that come and say, there are these new innovations that we want to bring into your context. Is there policy environment? Can you develop the policy environment? And we're saying, well, now that it is part of the discourse on industrial policy, let's collectively develop a vision for what the digital economy and digitalization means in the South African context. And if you like, you build it back to even the level at which we're talking about industrialization.
Yeah.
Because part of the opportunities we have as we talk about critical minerals and the beneficiation of critical minerals, it is the opportunities around the rare earth metals and the deposits that we have as a country and within the region, and seeing the digital economy as part of the process of, one, participating in the industrialization on innovative products and utilizing manufacturing and beneficiation and industrialization at source or closest to source as possible as a basis on which our participation is not only at an intellectual level, it is also at the level of actually producing the goods and products that are required in this digital age.
Minister, I want to double click on that because I think you've said something very, very important, and that is how do we make sure that we are not stuck in an intellectual warp and we're not really translating those innovations to actual development outcomes, to the people of South Africa and the people of the African continent. What is the mechanism that South Africa is using to ensure that that translation takes place? I've heard of the Triple-helix as a way in which we're thinking about the ecosystem. Can you just bring us all in? What do we mean by the Triple-helix ecosystem? And more importantly, do you have an example that is a practical that shows that these ecosystems are actually taking the intellectual ideas and really achieving real practical development outcomes?
Well, the country has developed a national systems of innovation, which is the basis on which the Triple Helix model has been developed. And this is about an ecosystem that brings together government, business, and academia and research agencies into an ecosystem that promotes innovation. And this would be about the role of government in setting policy, in creating incentives, in providing subsidies, grants, and financing to enterprises, to promoting the research and development that happens, and of course, the enterprise development initiatives. And I think that the system is beginning to take shape in a manner that is very exciting. I mean, if you take the Melovan as an example, and Puti might be able to reflect on that and their utilization of the technology, which is about last mile delivery vehicles.
Yes.
The innovation happens in the country. The grant is provided by the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition to promote the research and development process. The IDC provides the financing for the system. Academia comes in terms of the research that's necessary there. And then the entrepreneurs are able to develop the technology to have a three-wheeler electric vehicle that's manufactured in the country, providing the service in terms of last mile innovation. And this has already started. Take a lot, and others have begun to adopt the technology and ensure that these vehicles are deployed in the country. It is now looking at the export market. The UK and other countries have looked at it as an innovation to adopt in their own context. The tests have been done. So it's about this ecosystem where there's collaboration and cooperation between government, business, academia, and research and innovation agencies that should promote a more integrated system of innovation.
I want to bring your voice into this, Puti, because I think it's quite exciting to realize there's a black box in essence that really allows for that collaboration to take place between government, the private sector, as well as academia, allowing us to translate innovations into development outcomes. What, in your view, is the glue that holds it together? What is it that makes it work? Because once we understand the sticky effect and what holds it together, we can replicate those in other parts of the country.
Yeah. One of the things that is important is leadership. And I'm very, very proud of the fact that in Minister Pakstau, we have a minister who is pro-business.
Got you.
Pro-business from the perspective of growing the economy of South Africa. When he took up this ministry, I remember one of the first things he did was to call us all in to his office. And we all went into his office and met with him and his team and the DG. And we all laid out key issues around our businesses. And he gave his input. And then we had, ongoing meetings thereafter. And the important thing is that for the minister, it wasn't just about listening to us, but it was actually about activity.
Right.
He was focused about what are you actually doing about this and about that. So when we came and we spoke to him about what Takealot was doing in terms of the township economy, he then said, well, you're focusing on Gauteng. Why only Gauteng?
Yeah.
What are you doing in the rest of the country? And so we've now moved into Mpumalanga and other parts of South Africa because the minister is working with us to make sure that we are really fully making sure that we are part of the South African economy. And so, working with government in such a meaningful way makes a huge difference for us because we know that we can be able to achieve the things that we need to achieve for South Africa. It's not just about growing just our own dividend growth, but growing the GDP of this country, but also ensuring that young South Africans are a part of the story as well. Because when you look at the many successful businesses that we have in our country, if I look at a company like Discovery, at some point it was a startup. Yeah. And today it's a huge, significant company in the country. And the truth can be the same for many startups that we have in the country as well. And so when we look at this, this triple alliance, I'm trying to ignore saying the word. It is so important because it does come alive when all of the three parties are working together. And that is exactly what is happening now.
I want to stay with you, Puthi, a little bit. I mean, you've opened a window in my mind. I'm trying to think of that day as you all walked into the minister's office, and you probably walking in with challenges that you want to put on his desk to say, Minister, we need this, we need that. In order for business to thrive, this is what we need. And I want to disrupt this happy family that we have happening here in the front. I want to know, what was one of the things that were important for business to put to the minister to say, in order for us to deliver on the development mandate, to really be contributors to development in the country, this is at least one of the things that we need to change. What was that uncomfortable part in the conversation? Because there must have been an uncomfortable part in the conversation.
Oh, there were many uncomfortable parts. Because, we had just come out of the OIPMI, the process that we'd gone through, just in terms of regulations
Yes.
for the industry. But it wasn't just regulations in South Africa, but also global regulations that were impacting the digital industry. And so there was a lot of discomfort that had already developed over time. But through having open conversations, it made it possible for us to deal with each problem at a time.
Yes.
So that we could then start to unlock the bigger issue of creating value for South Africa.
Yeah.
That if we can have an environment in South Africa where digital companies can be able to scale, we can then be able to create a GDP that is meaningful for the country, and also be able to grow more meaningfully for the rest of South Africans. So, it really was very much about that. But it started with just looking at every little issue at a time. And I think it's a road that we're still walking, and it will continue, Minister.
Well, certainly. I think part of what we need to acknowledge is the reality that between government and business, we've spoken past each other for a very long time, if not screaming at each other. And I think that part of the collective realization is the need for us to cooperate and collaborate. Of course, there'd be healthy tension. Government's duty is to regulate. When you regulate, pass laws, develop policies, you have to make choices, and choices impact on businesses differently. You have a different set of considerations. But for as long as business has the sense and the confidence that, one, you're applying your minds objectively, certainly when you consult, that it is real, that you're looking for real input, and that you're seeing business as partners. I think building that relationship is an important part of ensuring that the confidence is built. And we're not starting from a vacuum in reality. Part of what we need to celebrate as a country is what in many countries is considered very novel, which is the implementation of Operation Vulindlela.
Yes.
Because as we implement Operation Vulindlela, we're talking about structural reform in the South African economy on the basis of a partnership between government and business.
Yeah.
We're talking about the successes that we're achieving in relation to energy supply as a result of collaboration between business and government. The successes that we're beginning to achieve in relation to logistics, ports, and the efficiency of our transport and logistics systems, the policy environment, the ability to attract private sector capital and private sector participation is because of a collaboration between business and government.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about the overall structural reform agenda, it is on the basis of an understanding that we can work together to yield better results. So, and we need to fully take advantage of this period where government and business are singing from the same hymn sheet, working towards a common objective. In many ways, if you think about the messaging from business, they are even more bullish, if you like, about the direction that the economy is taking. Of course, government has to be cautiously optimistic in terms of the work that's being done, but the statements that have been made by business are indicating from an investor point of view what their perspective is about the economy, about its growth, and about the prospects of our economy.
Minister, I want to lift our heads a little bit so that we can look at the region and the continent a little bit. But before I go there, I just want to put this question to you, Puti, because I think the reality, and I said this earlier, is that business is more likely to realize innovation at a much faster pace than government, just because of the agility built into business models, the flexibility that you've got to really try new things and to sandpit new things and to try them. Do you think that there are untapped opportunities for us to harvest the innovation that's coming out of business and more quickly transplant it into the government agenda so that it drives development?
Absolutely, Nozipho. In fact, I had a conversation about this with the minister just before we started. And it really is about ensuring that from a regulatory perspective for startups, early stage businesses, that the compliance levels that they have are far reduced from other more mature businesses such as ourselves, so that they can be able to really scale a lot faster. That's what they need. Because we often talk about these startups and early stage businesses as just requiring finance, but it is actually more the path for them to be able to grow. So that is something that's important, just creating the space for them to do business a lot easily. But the other issue is for us as private sector to continue to invest into our people. So as Naspers, I'm very proud of the fact that since the year ending FY22, we've invested $14 million into the digital education of young people in South Africa.
Yeah.
And not only have we done that, but we've ensured that 95% of those young people are placed in employment, because it is about ensuring that young people have access to digital education. And what we're finding is that we're actually sometimes reskilling the youth. They're graduates from university, but we're actually reskilling them to be able to have the digital skills that they require. Then we're able to place them into different corporates and different banks in South Africa who require the skills in cybersecurity, skills in the various digital skills that are required in the country. And so it's important that we continue to do this from a private sector perspective and from a government perspective, looking to ensure that we are creating an environment where there's less regulation, but also that young people and all people have access to skilling and also capital for the businesses that they are starting up.
But you've raised a very important point, which I'm going to build on now, which is the idea of the skills pipeline and the corridors that we need in order to really have innovation skills to not drive only the development agenda in South Africa, but more broadly for the region and the continent. And this is where I want to come, Minister, to say, how do we, you spoke about ensuring that we've got a launching pad or a bridge to take the innovations happening out of South Africa to the world. How do we make sure that as we leapfrog to the world, we don't skip the continent?
Well, firstly, let me start with the country, because we actually had this discussion with business last week in a conversation where we were talking about jobs, to say part of the reality is that, particularly with regards to digital skills, we've seen the offshoring of a lot of digital skills from the South African market.
Right.
If we are able to reshore those skills and capabilities and enterprises into the country, there's a significant pool of young people whose skills can be upgraded to meet the requirements of business. And we've said, okay, we will, through the skills development programs, through the sector education and training authorities, develop a system based on demand from business about the level, quality, and capability that you require to build a pipeline of skills amongst our young people, so that we can reshore these jobs into the country. And I think it's about the point I was making earlier. It's about business and government sitting down and saying, you need this to be able to advance, and this is what we can be able to provide. Let us cooperate and collaborate, and we can keep each other honest in the process. Are you producing the skills? Are you taking these young people? But coming back to the question that you're asking with regards to the continent, firstly, I think that the issue of the digital divide is premised on the reality that there is inadequate investment in infrastructure.
Right.
So you need to address the issue of digital infrastructure, broadband connectivity, and technologies that would be able to push the continent to the next level in terms of just basic access, because access is important. The second is in terms of knowledge and skills.
Right.
The ability to have the knowledge and skills to be able to take full advantage. Because it's one thing to have the technology at your disposal, but if you don't have the skills and the capability to fully take advantage of that, then there are limitations. And the third is building the ecosystem that promotes innovation. And we think that the ability to cooperate around that is going to enable the continent to move to the next level. And that's one of the issues that we're placing on the agenda as we talk about G20 being an Africa G20. What are the things that we're collectively taking into the G20 with partners in finding solutions to these issues? And we're saying, well, these are the things that require attention for us to take the continent to the next level.
Puti, I'd love your comment on these conditions that Minister has put, and then I'll open up we've probably got time for 1 or 2 comments. But the conditions that the Minister puts in place, he says the infrastructure's got to be in place. He says we've got to have the knowledge and skills to use the technology, and then the technology must be there as well. From a business perspective, with these 3 boxes ticked, would business then readily be able to really see trade across the African continent, collaboration across the continent, so that we really see an innovation that is not only for the benefit of the South African market, but really benefits the continent more broadly?
Absolutely. And I think we're really poised for that. We've been speaking about, for instance, what we are doing with respect to the African, African Free Trade...
Continental Free Trade Area.
Continental Free Trade Area. And we've been speaking about various projects there. And I think, in fact, I was having a discussion yesterday morning with the CEO of the DBSA, Boitumelo, and we were talking about infrastructure projects that are critical to enable business to be able to
go to those markets.
Yeah, to go into those markets. And so she was talking about what they are doing to finance a number of infrastructure projects to enable business to be able to operate there. And one of the things that I'm glad about is the fact that in South Africa, we have that support. We've got spectrum that was made available to us just, I think, 2 years ago. And so telecoms businesses are busy, rolling that out. But from an infrastructure perspective, there is still quite a lot of work that is required. And as the minister was saying, but the important thing is that I think everybody, from private sector to government, are focused on ensuring that we can get these projects to actually be implemented, for us to stop talking about them and to actually just implement them and be talking about what we've done.
Puti, thank you so much. We've run out of time. I know that both of your schedules are really tight. I do want to put you on the spot one last time. I'm going to ask you to put a billboard up for me. Minister, don't worry, Puti and Naspers will pay for it. It's going to be a big billboard. We'll put it outside. And it starts with innovation and development. And then you complete the sentence. Innovation and development, and you complete the sentence. So it's really fun, and of course, the best billboard wins the day. All right. So I'm going to go with Puti first, since she's paying for the billboard. Puti, innovation and development
is the future of young Africa.
Let's give Puti a big round of applause. Thank you very much. Innovation and development is the future of young Africa. So I think Naledi will really love that as well. Minister, innovation and development?
Innovation and digitalization at the center of our industrial development strategy.
Sure, it sounds like a government policy document, but it makes innovation and digitalization at the center of our development strategy. Let's give the minister a big round of applause. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope to see you as we have more conversations over the next coming days. Thank you so very much.